you're very welcome to another episode of the Women's Rugby Pod. I'm Johnny Hammond, and we've got Rachel Burford alongside the World Cup winner. How are you, Burf? You're looking very sunned.
I've just come off training, so I think I'm just actually tired. So it's just tiredness, not necessarily.
A tired glow.
Yeah.
Okay. Call it raw, please, for Burf, ladies and gents. But a bit of sun in you being using there as well, are you? It takes me back to 2014. There's all of you bright blonde women in the England backline that couldn't tell apart. But a bit of sun in there, or are you just all natural?
Or even know what sun in is.
Those that know.
Yeah, I don't think it exists anymore. What does it? Might go down that route. It's really expensive to get highlights nowadays.
Well, there you are. Bit of lemon juice, and you're away. Apparently.
Well, I think you can do some tips.
Go on, then. Give us a tip.
No. Anyway, what you got for us this week?
Oh, mate, it's packed. It's jam-packed. It always is, isn't it? We've got a historic game down from New Zealand. We've got the lights coming down on England's spring campaign. So I've done there. And we've got a little bit of Premier news and a little bit of news from over in France as well. Plus this massive news from your club as one of the founding pillars is removed from Harlequins. All of that to get into. But first of all, we've got Simon Middleton on the pod, the England boss, to talk us not only about that bizarre ending over in France at the weekend and player safety and from his point of view, but also just have a look back at England's campaign over the Six Nations and that friendly last weekend. Let's get straight into mids. Anyway, it's a very good morning on the WRP to the England boss, Simon Middleton. Good morning, Simon. How are we?
Yeah, pretty good. Obviously, well, sort of enjoying life after the Six Nations, but enjoying it in quarantine. So yeah, plenty of opportunity to do our review work, which always follows a big tournament. So yeah, it's probably gives us opportunity to spend some valuable time sort of looking at the detail of what's just gone off.
So back from France in isolation for the rest of the week?
Yeah, we got a test again on Thursday. If we get those tests back, we can come out of quarantine. We've got another test on Sunday just to make sure that everything's aligned. But yeah, we've probably got about another 3 days. Welcome
relief then, because you're not in the car, clocking up the road miles, and yeah, as you say, you get a chance to sit down and do your review work, which leads us nicely on. I think that's part of my role here, to lead us nicely on. Six Nations as a whole, we'll get to in a second, but we've got to start with the with that bizarre end to the game in France, with the lights going off. How did it all play out for you, and just your thoughts now that kind of the dust has settled and the lights are back on?
Yeah, it's one of them things that, you know, it's probably never happens once in a lifetime to you. But I just my diary memory of it was I just knew the lights wouldn't come back on, and I just thought straight away we won the game because I knew it had gone past 60 minutes. And that was pretty important. We won that game, given that we'd found out earlier in the day via BBC website that if we lost the game, we'd slide to number 2 in the world, which I found absolutely bizarre. But that was a little bit of extra motivation for us. So anyway, we just made a substitution. Just got Claudia McDonald on the field, which we wanted to get her on for 20 minutes, and we were just waiting for a breaking play. And I looked, it was 61 and a half. And I said, right, let's get Claude on. And I don't know what was in her first pass, but as soon as she hit, the lights went out. And it's one of those things, because it's like when stadium lights go out, it's very rare that the game, and particularly because the game was so late at night anyway, I was like, that's it. And yeah, as it turned out, it was.
And how was it relayed to you that was it? Were there officials from the ground?
Yeah, there was. So obviously there was the initial reaction, which was a bit bizarre really, because the French, within 30 seconds, were in a huddle in the middle of the field. We were just wandering around a little bit like, wow, what's going on? So we obviously got down pitch side and started just sort of weighing the situation up. I think it was a little bit like I said to our team manager, right, just go see the ref, just find out exactly how long the period is before we have to before the decision's made. And she was like, yeah, no problem. So she went and she came back and she was like, oh, they said 15 minutes. If the lights aren't back on in 15 minutes, the game will be abandoned. And I said to her, just confirm, we've gone past 60 minutes. We win the game. And she come back and she was like, yeah, that's the situation. So we waited for best part of 15 minutes. And then they came back in and they were like, oh, we're pretty confident we can get the lights back on in sort of 15 to 20 minutes on top of the 15. And I, at that point, I just got the medical staff together and I was, look, you tell me what you think, but that doesn't sound great to me. We've just come off the back of halftime. The girls have, we're at the end of a very tough tournament. The girls have warmed up, played half a game, cooled down, warmed back up, got back into the game. And now we're going to have to go through another process that, even if we've got the lights back on, you will be looking at the best part of 40 minutes to get the game on, which would take us to nearly 11 o'clock at night. So I just said to Ali, look, and the medical staff said, well, what do we think? Like, it's not a good idea. I said, no, we're not prepared to do that. Because they were, because it was a friendly, class as a friendly, they were saying you can decide between yourselves if you want to extend the game. But we were just looking at them, just going, this has just got disasters written all over this in terms of the welfare of the players. And so we just said, and I was of that opinion that 15 minutes won't mean 15 minutes to get the lights back on top of what's already gone. And it definitely didn't seem that way. I think the lights did strike up, but as we were leaving the stadium about an hour later, so that was it, really. It was bizarre, but at times like that, you got to think about the players and what you're asking them to do. It was frustrating for us because it'd been a really tough game, as you'll see, but we built a lot around how we finished the game, and we knew in the first game against them it would be the last sort of 20 minutes, and particularly the way we'd selected the bench. We had probably more firepower on the bench to come off this week than last week. We had different types of players. So we had Bottoman on, we had Cleal, we had McDonald, we had Beckett, who trained fantastically well the week before, and Bottoman. So we had a lot of firepower, and I was really confident that we would be able to kick on. And apart from the field position they'd got just before the break, the actual lights went out. We dominated the second half. So there's nothing to suggest that the score would have been anything different, or even more in our favour. So we're a bit frustrated that we didn't get to action that part of the plan, and that those players didn't get game time. And we had two young ones on the bench who, there was a chance if we could have got away, another score away, we'd have probably got those two on the field. So there was a lot of reasons to keep the game going, but ultimately player welfare has to be the top of the agenda. And at the same time, there's some very big club games about to come up, semi-finals and finals, and you've got to consider the big picture at times like that.
Yeah. If it had been, it's a question that I think you probably just answered there at the back end of your answer to the last question. But if it had been 58:30 on the clock, is the mindset, is the decision different, or is it still just it's player welfare?
No, I think it's still player welfare. I think at that point, your medical staff are there for a reason, and times like this, you completely trust what they're going to tell you, and all they did was reaffirm what I felt. We were in total agreement. So another 2 minutes either way wouldn't have made any difference. You looked around the changing room. It was a brutal game. Two brutal games back to back in a short turnaround and a travel in between. We'd spent a day on a coach, which was great actually the way we got there. But there was so many different dynamics to that game that you would have never forgiven yourself if we'd have gone back out and a player had picked up a serious injury.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's move away from Lightgate and the sexist guy who was dealing with the lights at the stadium by some accounts on social media. It's just extraordinary. It's one of those things, and it is 2021, so nothing is off the table, is it? It's just your assessment then of the Six Nations as a whole, purely with the Red Roses hat on. Your marks out of 10. If you were in a sort of slightly educational way, but also the things you need to just go back and have a look at, and the things you've been really pleased with. Oh, that's 3 questions in one, but it's dusty bin.
Yeah. Oh, mate, you're asking me to do give the outcome of
the review.
The review before we've done it. I'm not sure I'm allowed to do that. The review, right? I'll give you 4, mate. Yeah. I mean,
what did you expect me to ask this morning then?
6.5. No. That's fair enough. I'm just thinking, how can I give you a broad without getting myself in hot water? 6.5. I would say 6.5. Yep. I would say but I think that, and this is a little bit, and I know this might sound a little bit odd, but that's one of the disappointing things about not completing the last 20 minutes of the competition was, I said to the players before we went out for that last game, there was a lot of things on our agenda that we wanted to get out of the comp that were right on the borderline between tick or cross, and that game would probably decide a few, and the last 20 minutes of the game would have probably decided a few. Things about our physicality and how one of the biggest things we wanted to do was see what our physicality like, see how we can sustain intensity in the games. And what I would say is, I mean, with the greatest of respects to Scotland and Italy, you're probably going to find that out more against France. And we found that, and I have to say that's the best French side I've seen for a long time in those games. They've reshaped a bit about how they go about stuff. Very physical, defensively, a lot of physicality, line speed, put you under a lot of pressure, try and drive the tempo of the game through their tap and goes and through their just their general energy in the game. And I also thought some of their depth played really well as well. So they really challenged us. But I thought in the first game we got them at the end of the first half, and we got them at the end of the second half. In terms of, I didn't think, although the game was close, I didn't think we were going to lose that game because I thought physically they didn't have enough to get us with, and I could see us getting stronger, and I saw that in the second game as well. So I think in terms of a real big positive, one of the things we'd worked on and talked about wanting to see was how can we maintain physicality in the game and keep our intensity levels high. And I thought we did that through both games. Hence the 20-minute being the last one. We wanted to see that because ultimately in the biggest of games, that's probably going to be when the deciding factor comes out, and the impact of the finishers, which we've got I think we've got a very specific group of players, squad of players that can be divided into starters and finishers. Now, nobody wants to be a finisher. I mean, they want to be in the squad, but they don't want to be a finisher. They want to be a starter. So the challenge is that for those guys to convert what I probably see as a 25-minute real high-intensity performance to a 60-minute one, and then we can flip it on its head. So to not get that last bit in from France was another thing that sort of left a couple of things, a couple of stones unturned as such. But generally, and I would take no pleasure in this whatsoever. But if you look across the course of the 4 games, there was a lot of players left the field that weren't England players, if you know what I mean. We kept all our players on the field, strong, fit, going. We've built up a real sort of resilience and robustness, which you're going to need to go to New Zealand and win a World Cup. And that was one of the other things. So when you talk about physically, it's not just about the intensity. It's how robust can your team be under extreme physical pressure like we had in the 2 France games. And there was a few French players leaving the field, but there wasn't any English players leaving the field in any of those games. And those are the details that I reflected on with Alex Martin, our strength and conditioning head. You measure physicality in different ways. And as you take no pleasure from any player leaving the field through injury, but if that's a reflection of us developing our strength, robustness, it's something England have lacked in the past, and that translates well from what we've been training and trying to do. So I think from that point of view, that's a big plus for us. I think the depth of the squad, we brought other players into the squad, and we've got so much strength and depth now, and sorely tested. I mean, we were down to our last 24 players when we went into that thing, but not because of injury. There was a lot of factors built in, COVID, the sevens, etc., etc. But we always knew that last game we stretched a little bit in terms of, and because we tested a specific number of players right at the start, 35 players, and every week those 35 players were tested. Now, we had a couple on that list that we didn't go to, that we could have done. But ultimately, when you take all the factors into account, we were down to our last 24. But we still went to France and won, and that takes some doing.
Indeed, it does.
What do we?
Yeah. So I was going to say, many congratulations on the win. What makes up the 3.5 then? Out of 10, the bad bit, the work-ons.
I think we've got to be. Yeah, we've got to be more effective with the ball. We got to early on in the game, the first 60 minutes of the game, or the first 30 of each half. We don't want to be a back end half side, so we've got to find a way of translating some of our forward momentum into more chances that don't revolve around set piece. Because the other thing was a set piece was probably the biggest. I thought our line out against France in the second year was outstanding. Really, really good. It's come under pressure in both games, I think. But then again, France are, I think they're setting the standard for scrummaging in the world, and that's something for us to look at. But in the first game, line out, we had some good positions, but we couldn't get the platform right. In fact, we had a lot of good positions in the first game against France, but couldn't get the platform right. And then you're either playing off scraps or it's been reversed into a penalty, or you've lost the ball at the set piece. So there's a volume of work to do there. There's a volume of work to do with our general attacking play, and just how we open defences up a little bit more. I thought our defence was a highlight through the tournament, but at the same time we're still knocking off at times, and we got exposed about 3 or 4 times by France coming. We're working really hard on the outside, but we're not closing the middle of the field down, which is something like the France game. But if you put pressure on the outside, they generally come back down the middle, and they got us a few times around there. But we scrambled well, and which is all part of defence. And then the other part of our game was our counter-attack, which I thought was outstanding. Something, again, we've worked on an awful lot. Teams are starting to kick a lot more now. France actually kicked the ball more than we did in the last game. And we adjusted our plan to try and get the ball behind them and shift them around a little bit more. But that's probably a product of Tremblay going to fullback. Off the back of a kicking game comes a counter-attack game, and ours was pretty good with the chances we had. I mean, Abby Dow, absolutely sensational. But I thought we brought the ball back pretty well in all the games. I think I've talked when I'm talking about the France games a lot here. I think the Scotland games and the Italy games, we were good out of the block, Scotland, but then we just mentally we knocked off. Which was really disappointing because we set ourselves up to really sort of put our foot down in the second half, and we wanted to do that, and then we didn't do it. But then in Italy, it was a reverse of it. We were slow out of the blocks, but then we went through the gears in the second half, and it shows if you come up against a defence that isn't France or offers you opportunities, we can strip their defences down, but we're going to have to be better against the better defences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Few things there.
A lot there. Absolutely. Well, I asked 3 questions in one. So, No, delighted for Abby. And it's been a bumpy road the last few weeks. And I'm absolutely delighted to see her performing quite so well. I know you're not a man to single out individuals, so I won't ask you to. I think fairly obvious and across the board with various awards and stuff. Probably clears out an outstanding Six Nations. Zoe Allcroft's in those kind of conversations as well, but many more. Just how bad are your headaches when it comes to selection meetings? And in particular, I'll give you just a couple of hot spots. That sort of back row, back five, and also sort of in the centres as well. You've got embarrassment of riches. You almost had sort of product a failure of your own success, really, getting these players to such an unbelievable levels.
Yeah, it's what we want, isn't it? It's what we talked about, off the back of 2014, and then still lots of work to do off the back of 2017 in a lot of positions, and the back five bit, and that's the versatility. That's where the versatility bit comes in, and fair play. That's one of the things which Blaze really brought to the pack in his time with it as well, was the versatility. The players, I'm a this and I'm a that, and he would say, no, you're a back five player, and we've got to develop your skills to play in all those positions, or a majority of them. So yeah, he makes for good conversations. We try to tell the England captain that she's on the bench for the game against France, first game against France. That's not an easy conversation, but it was the right conversation to have, because Poppy was absolutely outstanding. I tell you what it does do. It gives you an opportunity to really think about how you want to select not just the players but the makeup of the side. So when we went into that last game, Mark Luffman and myself kicked the selection around for ages. We had players all over the place, and I looked at it, and in the end, I just went, right, I think we should just do this, and we moved everybody back to the positions that they played most for England. So we moved Zoe into the second row, Poppy at 6, and brought Sunter in to start at 8. We wanted to get Miller Mills in because she's been outstanding. The 7 was sorted because Ali was out of the equation. But when you look at something, you go, it just doesn't sit comfortably with me. That all players playing really well. We had Sunter in the second row. We had Poppy at 8. We had Zoe at 6. And I just looked at it and I'm like, no, there's too many players out of position there. We need some continuity in this game. And the backs were a bit of a mix and match as well, because obviously, we lost Jonesy, so we didn't have a 12. Amber wasn't ready, and we thought she probably would have been by then. We couldn't get Laggy sorted with a visa to go right at the last minute. The French pulled the rug on that one when they'd cleared it. So we were, hence the Kenner at 12 hasn't played 12 since her first international game. But a lot of the pack now, so I just said to Luffers, mate, let's go with where we know they can play for England. But we could do that because they've been experienced in so many different positions and they're so comfortable doing it. So Poppy's played all the comp at 8 and then she jumps in at 6. Zoe's played all the comp at 6 and jumps into the second row. Harriet's played all over. She just jumps in and plays. The strength in depth's fantastic.
Yes, and good luck to you selecting your World Cup squad. I've got two more questions, if that's all right, mate, for you. I just wanted to get your take, and we've spoken a little bit on the pod with various people about the Six Nations and the fact that it was standalone, the fact that it was an abridged format, the fact that there was a lot of buzz around it. Geez, there should be, but things like the Fantasy League, which I'm sure you've spoken about, the Match Point Predictor, which I beat your old mate Gary Street at, and I only mentioned it because he was crying week 1 because he was right at the top. Anyway, no, he's in good form. No, absolutely. But no, I just wonder from your point of view, from the man who's leading the only professional side in the competition, these good things. Where do these things sit for you? And does it have an effect on the squad? The fact that these fantasy leagues are there, and there's a couple of new podcasts popping up, and unions are starting to do a few podcasts and that kind of stuff, and there's a bit of chat around it. Does it filtrate to the squad?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fantasy rugby was absolute red hot topic at the start.
Brilliant.
All the girls were massively into it. But obviously,
How much am I worth? How much am I worth?
They're not allowed. Well, yeah, exactly. But they're actually not allowed to do it because it's part of the thing. But obviously, that bit about how much am I worth, massive. So the banter around it, and obviously all the friends were doing it and everything like that. So I think they were all gutted that it actually fell into the category. Well, I know for a fact they were gutted. It fell into the category of the sort of betting and gaming for which is that we're obviously not allowed to do. But the buzz that created, and then all the other stuff that's really starting to generate now. But you know me, I come from quite a traditional background, but one of the things I've realised is that we've got to open up as much as we can to get the word out there, and so we've taken a really proactive approach in terms of promoting the squad from within and getting the girls exposure to as many sort of platforms as we can. And I think they've been brilliant because it's so easy to let that stuff affect performance. And I'm not absolutely convinced that it hasn't impacted on one or two players. In fact, I'm absolutely convinced it has. And that's still for me and the comms people to sit down and just have a look. But you to expect that. It's all about an education process. It's all about finding out what works for you, what doesn't work for you. But we've done a lot of fly on the wall stuff through this and through the autumns because people just don't want the same old. They need some insight. They need some close up and personal stuff. One of the things we watched on the bus trip on the way down, we watched the Chasing the Sun documentary, and I just found it unbelievable. Oh, it was incredible, inspirational stuff, and you think, well, that's the stuff that makes you like. I can't wait to see the Lions tour now off the back of that. Now that's the stuff that you want people to watch and go, well, I want a piece of that. That looks great. That looks really exciting and engaging. And the girls have got great personalities. I mean, honestly, this group just made me laugh so much. The Jess Beach and Zoe Harrison show that is continuous, is hilarious. Sarah McKenna is as mad as a hatter. And Taish, she's like, what a character she is. I found out Beckett plays guitar and sings, so they basically got a group up singing during the Six Nations. So you'll have to get them on. They were outstanding. There's a lot of things to the group that I'm finding out, and a lot of value in there that people would want to see.
And what about the format? I mean, generally, I know people have said actually like the kind of finals day, but we're not at a stage where we can start taking test matches away from any nation. So it would need to work those finals into sort of possibly even a bigger Six Nations. Those kind of chats and just sort of cheering the fact you've been having with your coaches and what have you. Where do you sit with that?
Yeah, it's a question I've been continually asked. I mean, first of all, the window is fantastic. To get the sun on your back when you're playing, and create that opportunity to play more high speed rugby is great. So I think everybody loves that. And the standalone bit from the men's, you only have to look at the amount of extra coverage we've had. You go on the websites, the rugby websites, and it's all about the women's game. And particularly on match day, which it should be, but the build-up's been fantastic. So I think the exposure in terms of growing the game and putting a better product on the field, the April window is a win-win. I love the finals day. I think, if you go traditional Six Nations, it's not like the men's. If we play France first up, as things stand at the moment, the rest of the competition is and so I think you could see the excitement, you could feel the excitement of finals day, and not just for the England-France game. The other games were bubbling as well. So I think it's probably one of those where, again, traditionalists, I love the Six Nations in the format, but you've got to be progressive, and you've got to be reactive to what people want and what creates excitement. So I think it's definitely worth another look at, because, as you say, we cannot lose international games. It's massively important that everybody gets a quota, and so it's maybe it just needs to rethink how do you take all those positives and look at some of the drawbacks to it, get rid of them, and build a comp that everybody can sort of flourish in.
Yeah. Welcome back, Spain. All is forgiven, and in you come. Netherlands, Germany. Oh, there's sides out there, aren't there? That Sweden, are doing stuff. One more for you, mids, and it's just slightly wider than the Six Nations. Now we're a couple of months on from that decision being pushed back. Are you now saying, well, I guess you have to, and I know you, and this is what you'll turn it around to, even if you kind of weren't thinking that way. But how much of a positive is it that it's been delayed? And I'm particularly thinking about that number 10 berth.
Mate, right from the word go, that's the right decision. Well, I was like disappointing, and the disappointment hit me a little bit more a couple of weeks after, because it was sort of, you felt like you came down a little bit. It took a bit of absorbing. Unquestionably the right decision, mate, because not just from a women's rugby point of view, you have to create the World Cup's not creditable, and it's not, then nothing's going to be. And without giving everybody the opportunity to prepare and be at their best, and whether it's a prepare to win it or a prepare to be the best you've ever been in it and finish as high as you've ever finished in it, you've got to be given that opportunity for the credibility of the competition. So that was impossible. In the situation we had, it was absolutely impossible. And it was just stacking it more and more in the favour of New Zealand, which they don't need any more advantage. You should always have an advantage. If you host the competition, you should have an advantage, because it's a little bit of a prerogative because you're hosting. But, I'd have been banging New Zealand need to quarantine as well, or do some sort of quarantine process as well, because you could have done that, but nobody was talking about that. But, there were so many things that would have negatively impacted on it that I thought it was unquestionably the right decision. From our point of view, we'd have been ready. We'd have been ready, but we could have been better, and we will be better with not having the Olympics impacting on our preparation, which it would have done massively. In terms of we losing 3 or 4 world-class players and very influential players for the whole summer preparation period, is going to impact on anybody. But it would have, obviously would have on us. I'm sure other nations would argue exactly the same, but I'm not too worried about the other nations. I'm thinking about what impacts on us. So it gives us time to develop those players, because as good as Eleanor Rowland's been, she's only got 4 caps. International caps, as good as Jonesy is, she's only got half a dozen, and they were right at the start of her career. Zoe Harrison's just starting to really flourish and take a grip of the squad. So we're seeing growth in her, and then you've got other players who, the sort of the players who really started to impose themselves on the squad, like a Zoe Holcroft, like a Sarah Beckett. Where will they be in a year's time? Where will a Bots be in a year's time? A Poppy Cleal. Poppy's had such a rough ride, but she's been absolutely outstanding in this tournament. So we had a real specific plan for her. We were never going to realise that plan if it hadn't moved. So we got that. And then there's players like Moena Tallinn who came in and smashed it out of the park completely for us. Would have been a walk into our World Cup squad at 18 years old, but then busted her ACL. Now if we get things right, she'll be ready. And that's another back 5 player.
You don't need any more.
So
don't be greedy now, Mids. Come on,
mate. You can never have too many. Never have too many. So it was for me. It was a bit of a blessing, I think. For the comp, I think it was a bit of a blessing. Well, it definitely was in my eyes.
Yeah. 100%. Mitch, I'm conscious that no doubt you've got another 400 Zooms to get onto today in your quarantine. People are probably peppering you to get in front of meetings as you're sat there at home. But thank you so much for all your time. As ever, there's loads and loads more that I'd like to ask you and get into. But always a real treat, a pleasure to speak to you. And thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on yet another Six Nations victory. What's that? Back to back Grand Slams. And a friendly victory in there as well. So, yeah, great to see you again this morning, Mids.
Cheers, Johnny.
Always great to get Simon Middleton on the pod. I know we get to say a little bit rugby nosy, but I you know me, I like that stuff. And if you're fully invested in a game of rugby, then he's a great man to listen to and to give us so much of his time. It's yeah, absolutely fantastic. But his take on the lights going down. I won't tell the listeners and viewers a few little WhatsApp messages you fired out to the team post that Burf. You seem quite annoyed. Have you settled down now?
Yeah, I have settled down, but it's just so frustrating, isn't it? For it to get so much traction through the Six Nations and kind of the fixture that played last week in Six Nations, and then for that to happen, it's just not okay at elite level, men or women. It shouldn't be happening, and I was just so disappointed that the lights went off. That's one thing, and I was really disappointed that the game wasn't then finished. If I'm honest with you, I wanted England to finish that game out. You know, big opportunity. I had a couple of debuts on the bench, wanted to see how they would go, and yeah, I was just. You know, overall, everybody was disappointed. It was such a tight game. It wasn't conclusive. It wasn't one team had the upper hand. It was, you know, going back and forth between the two. And we'd have just loved to have seen how that last 20 minutes is so critical in a league game because they're normally the times where games are won and lost. So, yeah, I was really, really gutted by it. I think it had a real bad look for the women's game. The fact that the lights turn up exiting out of your 22 and then you know the discussions to be on BBC where you know an England team manager is talking to the referee and stating that I think it's just it wasn't great for the game.
No, I couldn't agree more, but let's just take the sexism debate out of it and just throw that away because it's totally irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. Whoever's controlling the lights is not doing it in a sexist way or, geez, wow. I mean, if it was, then that's some conspiracy. We are hearing reports, nothing official from the FFR, perhaps a Gallic shrug, little weeds on the jeton or something like that, and they'll probably let it pass away. But I think World Rugby should come down heavily on it. And get a clear explanation. I think it's one of those things. It's happened in the men's game multiple times in World Cups. So let's just throw the sexism debate out there. From my personal point of view, I was gutted. I wanted to see England that last 20 minutes because I think that's, you know, they're a fully professional team and I think they are battle hardened. And I think for them to come through that, and there's been lots of swapping and changing, so they'll be really fresh. The bench, as Mid was saying, was full of impact. As you said, yeah, there's debutants
desperate to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Harriet Miller-Mills coming on, Bottomman coming on, all that kind of stuff. But I think what it does is it adds to a narrative, doesn't it? That you know, we take a couple of steps forward with it, be fantasy league or match point predictors or separate start for the women's Six Nations, getting loads of attention, that kind of stuff, and then it falls down for some reason, whether it be doing 2.5 kilometres for a full match to go and have a look at the TMO decisions on a screen, or the fact that we don't have halftime presentation. It just all adds to that narrative, and therefore people get swept up. Oh well, it's not with the men's. That's got nothing to do with it, but it does add to the narrative that it isn't done in the same way that things are done for the men, and I get that. I get that frustration. We're fully immersed in it, aren't we? So we understand the frustrations just fully. And the last couple of years for me are littered with frustrating conversations of people not willing to put their money where their mouth is and stuff. So I get that. It was really frustrating, and as ever, it's for the players, isn't it? As we talk about those debutants. But I think, as Miz was saying, 60 minutes in, you're beating France for the 9th time in a row. You've had 4 pretty, intense weekends. You played France back to back, short turnarounds, travelling. I get the fact that you go, do you know what? Bigger picture, club end of club season to go. Let's hang it up there and we'll take the W. But really, really sad way to end. And as you say, it makes it look real amateurish.
Yeah,
Really
and it does, and I think you're spot on with saying about the narrative. It just gives another reason to have another dig at the game, and make people want to step away from it, because it's like, oh, it's another thing that's going on. And I guess the question that probably is on everybody's lips, like if it was the other way around and it was France 17 and England 15, would France have done the same situation, not wanted to play? And so I think we got hello.
There's a little Hammond there, live on the pod. Hello, mate, you all right? Oh, lovely. Oh, well, good stuff. Thanks very much.
Brilliant.
I do apologise, Beth. Where were you?
I don't know.
Wilfred Hammond.
I'm saying, if it had been the other way around and England weren't winning that game, how would it have played out? I think France would have done the same, probably wanted to call it. They would want to have ended that losing streak against England. But, that's all easy to say now when it wasn't the scenario. And look, I do get it when you reflect and you think of, they're going to have to wait 20 minutes for the lights to come back on. I didn't know this, but apparently they can blow up. Is that right? If you turn lights straight back on that kind of magnitude and size. So that's why you have to allow them to cool down to then put the lights back on, which would have taken 20 minutes at least. Then players need to warm up again. They already kicked off at 9 p.m. So you can see all of those side of things. It's just such a shame, because that story of England-France was building. And we knew, like, even if England went on to win that game, and with the bench that Simons had, they probably would have. But everybody still wants to see them go and finish and win that game. And I think that's probably where a lot of disappointment from fans is.
I couldn't agree more. I think from your point of view of your standpoint of making it look amateurish, this is absolutely essential. And again, from the broadcast side, but we don't need to convince most people who listen to this pod to watch women's rugby. We don't need to convince people to go and follow the clubs and the Red Roses. We need to convince those floating voters. Jez used to work with us on the pod here, watches international rugby, doesn't watch a bit of club rugby. That's the people we want to get to suck in. And therefore, you've got to produce it as a quality product. What you guys are producing on the field is a quality product. And you've got to present it so. It's not being done by anyone like that at the moment. And I go back to my old employer, Sky. They did a Red Roses game. They did it properly. And there's multiple cameras, presentation, and it was done really well. And I get all the finance and what have you. But you've got to put your money where your mouth is. And it's got to be presented properly. And it just, little things like that, when you turn on, you go, oh, I might watch the last 20 minutes of that. Did it? Oh, right. Okay. And it's all a bit, and fair play to Sarah Orchard, did a magnificent job in very, very tough conditions. Been there. That's not a very, very lonely place to be as a broadcaster. So, look, what did you make of the first 62 minutes anyway?
Well, I think France were out of the blocks, and I think that was probably the best performance that we've seen from France. But their discipline in that last, coming into the the first quarter of the second half, you could see that their fitness started to drop, and then their discipline started to drop. And a real turning moment was that Poppy Cleal incident, where Poppy milked it a little bit. But that yellow card, because it was a penalty to France, they would have probably slotted the kick for 3 points. Suddenly they're ahead. And that moment, I think, was a big turning point for them.
Yep. How good's Abby Dow?
Oh, outrageous. Like, just her ability, the way that when she got that ball, because it was a bit of ping pong, wasn't it? Kicking. And, nobody was really going anywhere. They weren't particularly great kicks. And she just thought, do you know what? I'm not kicking this back, because actually the chase wasn't great. And just for her to weave in and out of France, and players slipping off Abidal, like Menage, who is a strong tackler, literally was like she's playing touch. And even over the lot, it was fantastic from her. But that got England out of a bit of trouble, that try.
Yeah, I agree. She did against Scotland last year, didn't she? And yes, as I said during the chat with Mids, delighted for her. And those in and around and looking down, we're very, very proud of her performance as well. So well done, Abby. Great to see you scoring tries like that. So it was 17-15 to England in Lille, with the match about at 62 minutes. And England remain on top of the world rankings, which, as Mid said, that was a motivation for them. Had England lost, New Zealand would have gone top, having not played for 18 months.
That's correct.
How that is worked out, I don't know. We could probably find out from Dom Ramos at World Rugby, but let's not get into that. I think we've had a bit too much technical language with your knowledge of light bulbs and stadium lighting already, Burf.
Yeah.
So some nice tries, and France led early on, didn't they, with Philippon, and then Abidal scoring again. That outstanding solo effort from her. Jessie Chimulier scored as well, capitalising on that yellow card for Zoe Harrison for that offside/obstruction. Minutes 14-12 at half time. 2 penalty kicks then exchanged before the lights went out, and it was a fairly sad and amateurish ending to a game. But light technicians and stadium managers and lights and timers are not sexist, so let's just not jump on that bandwagon. Because the other thing I wanted to say, Burf, and you're supposed to be ranting this week, not me, is if you start to turn it into that, it turns those floating voters away as well.
Yeah.
Because leave it alone. That's not the case. And it turns people away in that respect.
Well, it puts the game in the wrong place, and they're in the wrong light, and it's almost like it's seen as excuses, and that does turn people off. It's like, oh, here we go again. It's on that bandwagon as opposed to just for what it is. But I totally agree with you on that.
So that's England wrapped up for the autumn, the spring. Quite where I am at. My son coming into the room has really, really dishevelled me, I have to say. Bouncing in with his head around the corner of the chair there. Bless him.
Snuck in behind you.
Yeah, he's very sneaky, that one. Your overall impression then of England? I posed some of those questions to Mids. How tough a job is that selection going to be for that World Cup squad? Because as much as I know, I had a personal conversation with him, one of their first training sessions after 14. They just said we just didn't have that strength of depth. Nolly goes, and then Meg Jones has got to move, and Skaz has got to go back to 15.
Yeah.
And the scrum half situation leading into the World Cup, wasn't it? Somebody was injured, and therefore the selection wasn't quite right. So getting that strength of depth is one of the key focuses. But just how tough is it? He's made his job even more difficult by swapping and changing, and people performing so well.
Yeah, I think any coach wants to have that situation where they've got, potential 2 or 3 players who can play multiple positions and be able to slot in. We, in 2017 when we lost Nolly, it was massive. Nobody else had played in the fullback position, for a substantial amount of time. That's a big area against a kicking side like New Zealand. It put us in trouble because we had to move things around. So now developing depth in those different areas, in those different positions, Meg Jones could play 10, 12, 13, could probably play fullback as well. So having, a player that is really strong in one position, but then also can really perform at other position gives him such a great opportunity to pick players who can cover a few places, which might allow you to bring a bit of different X factor that may not have all the experience. My first cap, I went to a World Cup. Because they had so much experience around me, they were able to take a young player who wasn't captain, and that could open up. There's so many young talent at the moment in the Allianz Premier 15 that if there's a shining star, at the end of, say, next season, and it's like, well, actually, Emily Robinson, she's been on fire. She's been into a couple of camps. We're going to back her and take her because we know we've got some more strength and depth in that area. And I think it's a great place to be in, for certain.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your back five of the pack? World Cup final tomorrow.
World Cup final.
Against whoever. Let's say, for argument's sake, New Zealand. Who's your back five? Two locks and your three back row. Go.
Abby Ward, Zoe Allcroft, Marley Packer, Poppy Cleal. I'd put Sarah Hunter at 6.
Cleal at 8.
Yeah.
Marley Packer 7. Allcroft and Ward. And your 10, 12, 13?
Oh, come on. You said
no, come on. It's your area of expertise.
Oh, God, my 10, 12,
13.
5. And everyone's fit.
Yeah.
10, 12.
And I put one more caveat, and then you can't select yourself.
Oh, I wouldn't do that.
She would, listeners. She would. Before.
10 and 12, you're saying?
And 13.
And 13. Well, I'd put Skaz at 13.
Ooh. Would you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Skaz 13.
Oh. I'd put Zoe Harrison at 10. Oh, would I? Thinking for a kicking game. She'll manage the kicking game a lot better.
She's impressed me, the Six Nations, Zoe Harrison.
Yeah, she stepped up. And she showed real maturity, I thought.
Yeah. It's been a thing missing from her game.
I would go with Meg Jones. She's got a bit of X factor, and you have a bit of Skaz is a nice staple. Know what you're going to get. Same with Zoe. Put a bit of X factor. I mean, Meg does. She does have quite a few errors in her game, but she pushes the limit and she tries stuff, and they come off more than they don't come off. So, yeah, I'm going with that.
Harrison, Jones, Scarrett. Do you agree?
People are playing, and
yeah, no, of course, but we'll put you on the spot there. And do you agree with Burf that 10, 12, 13 for our World Cup final against the Martians tomorrow? Let us know on social media at Pod Women's Rugby.
Helena on with her footwork when the opposition's a bit tired. See ya. There you go. That's how the game's going to play out.
I mean, you can thank me later, but perhaps you should get into a little bit of coaching. I'm just saying. Look, the other big news, and it is kind of English news, and it's Harlequins news, but we must touch on it. Karen Findley is going to leave her position as forwards coach at the end of the season at Harlequins. She's been there from the beginning with her old chum Gary Street, who left the end of last season. It's too easy a question, but I suppose it's the most obvious question. How big a hole is she going to leave?
Oh, massive. You mentioned it there. She's been part of the DNA and the heartthrob of the squad right from the get-go. And yeah, it's not going to be the same not having her around. Hopefully she'll stay real close to the squad. And she's got so many deep relationships here with certain players that she's worked with for, we're talking over a decade of coaching individuals like Vic Cornborough, Fleet Fletcher, myself, a lot of players under her wing at Richmond, Scotland. And so, yeah, look, it is going to be a huge hole. She's got a big heart, and she cared and cares so much about players and the club. So, yeah, it's going to be really sad that come the end of the season and, we want to give her the best send off and one to really remember. So we've got a little bit of added motivation there to do it for Jock.
Look, it's not an easy question. It's not an easy answer, but you're half the WRP, and you've got to answer some of these tough questions at times. For me, Harlequins are very much leading the way, and in certain areas still very much are. But you lose Tony Diprose, and some people won't know who Tony Diprose was, but was huge in pushing the women's game. Then Gareth Sheep moves, and they're all for valuable kind of reasons to why they're moving on. Gareth Sheep's looking after youngsters in the pathway, Harlequins now rather than women's, and then Karen Findley goes, and I just 3 pillars of Harlequins women have gone, and that's to take nothing away from Gerard. But if you're looking from the outside, wow, really? All in the space of 18 months. That for me, if I was a Harlequins fan, and I've got to be unbiased, of course, but that would really worry me. That would really worry me, because who's pushing it now? Who's pushing that envelope that got Harlequins to be the standout club in women's rugby around the world? They're pushing those glass ceilings all the time. Who's pushing those bits and pieces now? Is it a bigger worry as I'm making out?
I think naturally you would have those worries when you start to see, massive influential people, part of a club, move on. Of course, you're going to feel some of those worries, but there's a lot of really good people looking after this space, the women's game, that really care about where it's going. And there's no way that a club that wants to be seen as the team and the club that is leading the way, that the foot's going to come off the gas. Let's just look at some of the players that will make sure that stays on. And, we a lot of us still talk a load to Gary. Tony Diprose is still there, and, they're not too far away, and they can still have, they still give us a lot of support. But, like things do change, and there's a different vision maybe that's happening at the club. And you've got Owen Eastwood, who's been doing some cultural work, and, at times things do move on and they do change, and maybe that's a direction of a whole club piece. Instead of looking at it in isolation, this is the women's game and this is the men's game, maybe they're looking now more about the whole club as a whole moving forward together.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm utterly remiss of me. I didn't even mention Atlanta St John.
St.
John. Part of that. Sort of. Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out, because and I've said publicly on air many times, whether in commentary or on this podcast, just how brilliant Harlequins have been in pushing things, and actually. It will be interesting to see if continue to keep pushing with these characters that have moved on. But look, we should move on to other news. So, news from elsewhere in the rugby world. It was a historic day down in New Zealand at Eden Park, wasn't it? The Blues and the Chiefs, the first ever Super Rugby women's game. The Blues Wahine against the Chiefs Wahine. I hope I've pronounced that right. I doubt it. Anyway, the Chiefs ran out 39-12 winners. Absolutely brilliant coverage, as you would expect down in New Zealand. 8,000 fans watched. All female referee team. Really, really intense game. An 18-year-old playmaker, Patricia Maliapo, was the first ever try scorer in women's Super Rugby history. That's not a bad start to your fledgling career, is it? Having that in their history books. It was just superb, lovely little grubber and finish as well. It was a classy moment. But brilliant occasion. Sky and Z put it on really, really superbly, and was there for all to see. Off the back of that. And it's becoming more of a trend, isn't it? And a trend that we certainly welcome. Was Les Elder, who's captained the All Blacks, the Black Ferns, I should say, came out in the press conference and just used that platform just to say the way stuff is being done at the moment just isn't good enough. And not her words, obviously, I'm not quoting her, but just players need to be resourced properly. And then Casey Alley came out, didn't she, as well. On social media, Chelsea Alley, I should say. I've got a Casey Alley. Chelsea Alley, another Karen Blackfern, took social media and said what's being asked of the Black Ferns players at the moment just isn't sustainable. This is a lady who's a World Cup winner, chose to hold down 3 jobs just to play for her country. It's just not right, is it?
No, and it's not just in New Zealand where they're talking about. Poppy Cleall came out this week with a quote as well on her Instagram page. She was up, for those of you who aren't aware, Poppy won Women's Player of the Tournament for the Six Nations just gone, and deservedly so. But she was also asked to give a quote of, winning the Player of the Championship. And she said that she had to be subtle. And she had written, I'll just read it here from Instagram. She says, I hope that other female rugby players and athletes are given the same opportunity to be the best they can. But what she really was saying within that message is, we can't carry on playing professionals versus amateur. Invest in the girls, invest in the passionate, dedicated athletes you work with and see week in, week out. They represent your nation so well. They deserve better, and they deserve the resources to reach their potential sooner rather than later. It has to be a level playing field. And that's not the first time Poppy Cleall has spoken out around these kind of issues. And, it's becoming more and more, isn't it?
100%, and fair play to you, Poppy. Not only have you had an outstanding Six Nations, but coming out and saying stuff like that. It used to be a fear culture, didn't there? And we were just waiting to get a little bit more news as to what's coming out of Canada. We'll touch on that next week. It's same kind of lines as well. A culture of fear, that people aren't able to put their head above the parapet and say, hang on, no, that's wrong. But now players are coming out and saying, that's just not good enough. And I totally welcome it. And as someone as high profile and who, is in a rich vein of sort of advertising and commercial and media sort of space that Poppy is in at the moment, using that platform is brilliant. Same with Les Eldon and Chelsea Alley. Fair play to you. Let's just do what they say, shall we?
As easy as that.
Why not? Anyway, elsewhere around the globe. Well done, New Zealand, by the way, and the Super Rugby. Now, just the rest of the franchises to kick on, and we'll have a proper Super Rugby down there. That's properly resourced.
Yeah, really cool that Super Rugby has begun that journey, and really looking forward to seeing that kick on and other franchises to get involved. But heading over to Russia, they've recently launched plans for a domestic 15s program. It's in a 10-year strategy that talks about a championship to be played as early as 2022. And on the back of continuing their successful sevens program, which anybody who hasn't seen them play sevens, they're a brilliant outfit. But Russia has a huge 15s potential and would want to showcase their ability, particularly having moved to 14th ranked in the world.
Yeah, that's brilliant news, isn't it? And WXV all coming into play. That is really superb news. Just got across 8 different time zones to play some away games, but the logistics. But look, that is fantastic news. It is. We are, aren't we? We're beginning to get things rolling elsewhere and around in the world. And Uganda, here's another place you wouldn't expect rugby to be playing, but. Results from both Tier 1 and Tier 2 with the Central Region's 10 Championship at the weekend. Tier 1, the Black Pearls are crowned winners, while the Blue Whales won Tier 2 due to some restrictions. Don't think there's going to be a national final between those two, but teams in Tier 2 can expect to continue playing, while the Tier 1 teams, players are likely to be involved in the national team training ahead of the Elgon Cup and the Rugby Africa Women's Cup.
That's brilliant news. And also in South Africa, provincial rugby has continued Premier and Championship divisions. 6 teams in the Premier League in an 11-week competition, leading into the top 2 teams competing in the final. 2 groups of 4 and 5 respectively to battle it out for the Championship division. And the 2 top teams of each group go head-to-head on the 17th of July to play for a spot in the Premier division. You can see that Link Campwell is making moves already in South Africa.
Watch that. Yeah, watch that space with Campwell involved. Impressive lady, impressive human being. Over in France, do you want to take this, mademoiselle?
I'll let you work on your French.
No. Oh, how selfless. How kind of you. How selfless. Round 4 of the Elite 1 playoffs in Pool 1. Stade Rennais went down to Blagnac 34-29. Lens just missed out 22-23 to Montpellier. Montpellier, of course, the big powerhouse over in France. In Pool 2, ASM Rogueminat beat Bayonne 19-5. And Stade Bordelais lost out to Stade Toulousain 19 points to 17 at home. Back here on English shores, the Premier 15's final round. What? How can it be the final round already?
I know.
It's Christmas next week. Anyway, in this round, Exeter, Gloucester Hartbury. Your last regular season predictions, please, Rachel Burford.
I am going to say Exeter on this one.
Yep. I'm with you. DMP Quins. Is that home win? Okay. Surprised.
Away win.
What's that? Home win.
Harlequins away win.
Oh, okay. Harlequins away win. Understood. We'll edit that. Loughborough against Sale.
Loughborough.
Wasps Bristol.
Wasps.
Worcestershire against Saracens.
Saracens.
Lovely. Exeter and Gloucester Hartbury playing for 5th. If Sale beat Loughborough and Bristol lose to Wasps, Sale could go 8th. But the top 4 are decided, just the places on that. And they're doing something a little bit different, are they? The RFU and some of the clubs. Quite a few games being streamed and sort of soccer Saturday type feel to it, with the tries coming in from different places and reporters and what have you being at various games. The streamed game is Wasps against Bristol. I know for a fact that Worcester Saracens is being streamed by Worcester as well. So yes, a different way of doing it. Good initiative. Probably be a lot better and a lot more exciting if there were things riding on it. But we have our top 4, so a little bit too little, too late. But look, it's progress, isn't it? So we should commend that. Be interesting to see how it works, actually. But yes, there are lots of plans and lots of ideas floating around next year for the Premier 15s and how it's broadcast and whatever. So yes, fingers crossed we can properly put the league on the map and get some proper fan engagement. So it's marvellous. Just finally to our shout outs then, Burf. Did you manage to catch the remarkable untold story of the 2014 Rugby World Cup podcast?
I haven't caught all of it. I have listened to some of it. And yeah, it's the first one I listened to. It was really cool. Just listening back to the memories, and yeah, it was really, really cool. So I'm looking forward to reading and listening to the rest. I've already had some people tell me about how good it is. So yeah, looking to dive into that. Yeah,
that's Gary Street and Graham Smith are alongside Eamon Hogan and Jess Bunyard. It really is really nicely put together, and some in-depth thinking about how the guys went about winning the World Cup and the fallout and all the rest of it. So yeah, do give that a little listen if you can.
Yep, and our friend of the pod, Kendra Coxidge, currently New Zealand halfback, has teased us about announcing coming soon a book called Little Kenj, noting that she could never find a book about girls playing rugby as a youngster. So this is an incredible thing for visibility for young girls. We harp on about it all the time. You have to see it to be able to be it.
Absolutely. Just a very, very quick shout out to Phoebe Shipley and Father Adrian, who got in touch. Thank you very much for your kind words, your kind message. Much appreciated. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. Do share the pod. I know we go bang on about it. I know it's going to drop in your inbox. You probably subscribed, but it does make a massive, massive difference. Even if it's just 3 words, just give us a little bit of feedback. Pop a little 5-star in there. Hey, Burf. And get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if there's certain guests you want us to get on, then put it in the reviews. Get in touch with us. We'll do our very best. But yeah, we want to hear from the listeners. So as much as you can, it really supports the pod with the rating and the subscriptions. So please do. And you can find us at Pod Women's Rugby across all social platforms.
The last thing really to say is thank you to Simon Middleton, the England head coach. Huge amount of time he gave us and some yes, he had to tiptoe around some issues, especially around the lights, but he was very politically correct. But no, always great to get him on the pod, and he speaks so honestly. And yeah, we appreciate the relationship we have with him and the RFU. Thank you to him. Thank you to the team, to Sean, to Emerson, to Harry, to Tom, to Jenny, to Rugby Nuts, to you, Rachel Burford. And remember, women's sport is an investment, not a cost.
Until next time.